Now, if you told me a few years ago that one of my favorite e-bikes would be a lightweight commuter bike that doesn't fold, that doesn't have fat tires, and honestly doesn't even look like much like an e-bike, I probably wouldn't have believed you. But after spending time with the isinwheel M10S, I can honestly say this thing surprised me. And stay until the end because there's one thing about this bike that completely changed how I think about what an affordable e bike should be. Now, for context, I'm around 260 pounds, so whenever I test an e bike, one of the first things I want to know is simple. Can this thing actually handle a bigger rider without feeling like it's struggling? And honestly, that's where the M10S made a really good first impression. The moment I got on and hit the throttle, I immediately noticed that this bike had way more power than I expected. Now, on paper, it uses a motor that's rated up to 750 watts peak, which sounds pretty standard these days, but specs don't really tell you how the e bike feels. What matters is what happens when you're actually riding it. And the best way I can describe it is this: it feels eager. When you start from a stop, it doesn't hesitate. When you're climbing hills, it doesn't feel like it's begging for mercy. Even at my weight, I never once got the impression that this bike was underpowered. In fact, the official weight capacity is around 330 pounds, which honestly makes sense because throughout my testing, I felt like there was still plenty left in reserve. But what surprised me even more than the power was the actual riding experience. Because unlike a lot of e-bikes these days that feels more like a mini motorcycle, the M10S feels like an actual bicycle. And I mean that as a compliment. The geometry feels natural, the steering feels light, the bike feels nimble. It doesn't have these gigantic fat tires making everything feel heavy and sluggish. Instead, you get a riding experience that reminds you why people enjoyed riding bikes long before electric motors existed. Honestly, if someone walked past me when I was riding this, they might not even realize that it was an e bike. And personally, I love that. Now, another thing that I really appreciate is the weight. At around 47 pounds, this is actually pretty light for an e bike. That might not sound important until you have to carry it into your garage, move it around your house, load it into a vehicle, or maybe simply maneuver it when the battery turned off. Now, a lot of e-bikes today are pushing 70, 80, sometimes even 100 pounds. This one does not. It feels manageable. And because it's lighter, it also contributes to that more natural riding experience. Speaking of riding, let's talk about comfort. The front suspension in this bike is actually really good. I rode over cracked sidewalks, rough pavement, bike paths, and some light gravel sections, and the front suspension did a fantastic job soaking up most of the punishment. It never felt harsh and it never felt cheap. Now, with that said, if I had one major request for version 2 of this bike, it would absolutely be the rear suspension. There were multiple times where I found myself wishing there was just a bit more cushioning on the back. The front suspension does a great job though, but when you hit larger bumps or rougher sections of the road, you definitely feel the rigid rear frame. Now, is that a deal breaker? I don't think so. But if they somehow added rear suspension while keeping the bike this lightweight, it would honestly be incredible. Now, let's talk about the tires. Now, this isn't a fat tire e bike. And I know for some people that's, going to sound like a negative. For me, it's actually one of the reasons I enjoyed riding it so much. The standard tire setup gives the bike a much more responsive and bicycle like feel. Turning actually feels natural, acceleration feels quick, and you don't get that floating feeling that some larger fat tire e bikes have. Now, if your goal is to commute, ride around the neighborhood, explore bike paths, or just enjoy riding, I think this setup actually makes a lot of sense. Battery life has also been solid here. The removable battery gives you enough range that I never found myself worrying about getting home. Obviously, your range will vary depending on your weight, terrain, temperature, or how much pedal assist you're using, but for normal riding, it performed exactly how I expected it. I also appreciate some of the smaller features that makes daily use easier. The display is simple and easy to read. You get all the information you actually care about like speed, battery percentage, riding mode without trying to overload you with unnecessary information. Now, the brakes have been reliable as well, the frame feels solid, and overall, the bike has given me confidence every time I've taken it out. Now let's talk about the things I didn't like. Number one, I really wish it had rear suspension like I said earlier. Number two is that it's not foldable. Now, whether that's a downside depends entirely on your situation. I found that other e-bikes that are foldable are heavier as well. So with this solid, rigid frame, I think that makes the e-bike lighter, which is nice as well. Because what I realized after spending time with the M10S is that isinwheel didn't try to build an e-bike that does everything. Instead, they focus on making an e-bike that simply rides well. And sometimes that's exactly what people want. Which brings me to the thing I mentioned at the beginning of the video. The biggest compliment I can give the isinwheel M10S is this. After a few rides, I stopped thinking about the fact that I was riding an e-bike. I was just enjoying riding a bike. And honestly, I think that's something a lot of manufacturers have forgotten. So would I recommend it? Absolutely. If you're looking for an e-bike that's lightweight, powerful, comfortable, capable of supporting heavy riders, and doesn't look like you're riding a futuristic electric tank, I think the isinwheel M10S is a fantastic option. No, it's not perfect. I still want that rear suspension, but for the price, the performance, and most importantly, the ride experience, this is an e-bike that I genuinely enjoyed using and one that I'd absolutely recommend. Thanks for watching everyone. If you have any questions at all, I'll see you in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe to my channel, hit that like button, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!